Hello and welcome to Breaking Barriers, conversations with inspirational leaders. And I'm excited to welcome Grainne Rodgers today. So, Grainne is a leader that's definitely inspired me. I've worked with her a few years ago now,
Mhm.
and it's been lovely watching her rise and have impact. And I know she's somebody that has a very positive impact on the people around her. Not least with her TED Talk, which she didn't mention in her bio, which I'm about to share with you. So definitely check out Granny's TED Talk. And so Granny is PwC. She helps organizations change when they need to embrace a shift in their underlying operations or processes. She's worked for years in Big Four management consulting practice and has significant experience leading and delivering large scale programs of change focused around technology implementations or improvements, and no doubt has probably impacted most of our lives without us even knowing it in those roles. She's worked across private and public sector and easily bridges the gap between business strategy and technology. Managed services business within the managed services and delivery execution arm of PwC, which, if I'm not mistaken, has been a rapidly growing area of the business, um, helping clients design and lead their change initiatives. So here she balances focus between ensuring a great people experience for teams underpinned by continuing development, evolution of our technology, enabled service offering, and market leading delivery of engagements. A bit of a mouthful that will understand what it means, maybe a bit more. But we're really interested in you and your career, your life, and the challenges, the work it's taken to help you to rise to the top in such a big, well known organization. I'm sure it must be competitive. So let's hear a little bit about your story, Grania.
Brilliant, Sinead. And thank you very much for the opportunity to have a chat today. Lovely to see you again. And as you said, really have always enjoyed working with you in the past. So thanks very much for the invite. So I guess I've had a career that at the moment has spanned about 23, 24 years. I joined PwC as a graduate 23 years ago, and probably one of the first graduate programs that we did within Northern Ireland, actually. And that was really going into our management consulting practice then. Learning what it was to be a consultant, all of those different skill sets that sort of bridged the consulting and the technology space. And I was really fortunate because I got to work on sort of transformation programs with clients, which meant that almost every 3 years you started a new role. But what it taught me was, you went in, you had to really build confidence within an organization, you had to build trust, you had to build relationships, and then go through that change cycle alongside them for sort of 3 years at a time. And you always got to see the end result of what you did. And that to me was really, really important, that you felt like you were making the difference. So I started as a graduate and I sort of worked my way through every single rank, within PwC, as we call it, so every grade. And I have found that to be very beneficial because it's helped me understand what it does it take to get to the next level every time. And now in my position, I get to actually work with people who are coming through, and I have that experience of what it's take to get there and to help people. And that's probably, what's driving me forward at the moment in that leadership role, really, is to make sure that I'm given the opportunities to other people coming through that I was afforded in the firm, which is really
Yeah, brilliant. And a few things have popped into my head. One of which was, uh, I wish it's interesting because I worked through a corporate in a different context, and funnily enough, it was when I discovered transformation and that whole change process and having that impact that I found something I actually loved
yeah.
to do. And I never considered the big four. So
It's interesting, yeah. And I think the fact that you get to see that you actually made the change, that was always the most important part for me. If you had ever walked away before that, I don't think it would have felt as impactful, or you would have felt that you were making a difference. Whereas getting to live through a change program with the clients is a real privilege, especially if you get to the other side and actually they have different ways of working, or they have a new organization, or they have new services in place, that's what's been really important.
Yeah. And you said, look, you get to help others now understand what it takes, and working through those levels helps you understand what it takes to get to the next level. So, younger Grainne, still young, starting out as a graduate, what was in her head, and what did she want?
Yeah. It's funny because I don't know that I knew exactly what I wanted to do going into, one of the big four. I had read something about being a systems analyst, and that had always stuck with me, right? I liked the idea of understanding enough about the technology, but actually translating that into the business world. And sometimes I think, is that because I wasn't really strong enough in the technology, so I sort of stayed in the middle. But actually, that's been a really, important part of my career journey, understanding tech, but translating it into business.
Yeah.
So young Grainne, it's funny because, if we think about some of the challenges or some of the reflections of there, I found myself as a young graduate in the tech business space, very often being the only female in the room. And that was quite, I don't know that I expected that going in. I definitely don't think I did, but that certainly became my reality quite quickly. But in the same way, it afforded me a real opportunity to learn from those around me, and to just start thinking about the different leadership styles that I was surrounded by, particularly in the likes of a big four. You do get an opportunity to work with many different people. And I sort of became this mosaic sponge almost of what did I like about that person, what did I maybe not like, what did I like about that person, and start to connect together the little bits of leadership that I found were really making a difference and were really impactful, and just sort of building that bank of ideas up over the years. But I think probably as you start out, it's all about can you make a difference, right? Can you actually be noticed, particularly when you're in a bigger organization? What could I do that sort of did set me apart from other people, or what could I do that sort of got me noticed? Because if you think about it as a pyramid almost in large organizations like this, there's many people at the bottom level of the pyramid, and you have to be able to shine. So what I did actually was just put my hand up and say, I want to take on this opportunity. And I put my hand up much more so as a junior member of staff maybe than I do now, but that's because I really wanted to learn, and I really wanted to learn from those around me, because I just felt that they knew so much more. As a graduate, I don't know, maybe it's just a Northern Irish thing, but I didn't feel like I knew loads and loads, so I just wanted to soak it all in, but actually put my hand up and say, I'll go and do that, because it brought me so many opportunities that were really, really impactful in my career, and I'm really glad I did that.
Brilliant. And what an amazing attitude. I'm sure when you look around at the younger people coming in, that must be something that you look for, is that attitude and openness to learning. So
absolutely. And I think also I loved communicating, and I think I got some of that from my parents and my background, where they've placed quite a large emphasis throughout my childhood on speaking to people. They were sociable in different circles. We were brought along with them. Conversation with adults was an important part of my childhood. And actually that did, the feedback that I would have received whenever I was quite junior was I could communicate with impact. I could have conversations. And actually what that led to was a real curiosity to really understand what was going on with different clients, and being able to talk to anybody from the cleaner to the CEO. And that's something that I guess with the rise of the smartphone, are we seeing as much of that today whenever we have people enter the workforce? And it definitely was an important part for me to make sure that I could communicate with all different levels. And that's something that I always look for, because it's so important.
Yeah. And I love thinking about teeny weeny Grainne then your parents. So what sort of situations would they put you in then to
Well,
practice that?
yeah. So my dad was like board of governors, was in the drama society, was in the fishing society. Mum was a catering lecturer, and they brought us to lots of different situations where maybe, like, say we were all going on the tour with the drama festival, where you had to talk to adults, or we would have visited relatives, and on a Sunday that would have been like a little family ritual. And we would have gone to talk to people, and it wasn't, back then it wasn't sit in the corner. It was actually part of the conversation. You certainly didn't have a phone to distract yourself with. You had to just talk and, make sure that you were imparting a little bit about you, but also you were listening and you were listening to what they were saying. So there's lots of different places. Or we would have gone into school with mum, or, we would have, like, a lot of people would have come to the house to visit and you would have talked to them. So that
And
was,
is that something you do with your children now then? Because it is different, they do tend to squirrel away with the screen and whatever. But like, I can see you learned leadership skills right from early on.
yeah, so it is something I try to do, right? Absolutely. For me, it's so important that you look people in the eye when you talk, right? And my kids will now do that, but the youngest is so much more shy than the elder one, and she sort of struggles with it a little bit. But yes, it is something I try to do. Sometimes I think, God, my mum did this far better than I am doing it, but I'm trying my best. I'm trying my best. And it's funny, one of my sisters is a teacher, and she will bring her children in to old people's homes to visit, so to teach her children how to talk to that older generation, and I think that's a fantastic idea.
Oh yeah, it's a lovely thing to do, and there's great research out there about the reciprocal benefits of that.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah,
know how they're putting schools and older people's homes together
together.
to foster that, like all those learnings and stories, and yeah, because I think something I learned from those situations was actually storytelling,
Yes.
which is something you would miss out on if you're not put in that situation.
Absolutely. And my dad was a great storyteller. We would have had, like older school parties where somebody was doing a sing song or piano or telling stories. And we just grew up around that. And you're right. It's a real skill. It's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so, are you seeing a difference then? Do you think in younger ones that are coming through now, coming in as graduates, and the skills that they have, that are amazing, and also some of the skills that they need to really work on and develop?
I definitely think the landscape has shifted a little bit. I think the skill sets that they bring, like, far outweigh some of the technology skill sets, for example, that we would have had coming into the world of work. And that's something to be really harnessed. I think the diversity of thought and the diversity of opinion that we see on a daily basis is amazing. And particularly, for our organisation, where we've really focused around social mobility aspect because of the diversity of thought that brings us, we're seeing a massive benefit of that. But funny, I was speaking to a group of school, like probably 13, 14-year-olds that had come to visit us in PwC a couple of weeks ago. And the teacher said to me, what would you give them as some really strong advice? And for me, it was communicate, right? That's so important. Like, one of the most important lessons that I learned as a young graduate was get out from behind your laptop, Grainne, and go and talk to people. And I've never forgotten it, because it did let me into so many different insights into that organization. And I just demonstrated that I was curious and I had a real interest in other people. And I see a lot of that, but I think probably it's something that we definitely should ramp up more for those people coming into the world of work, because the people who are like that, they stand out. They're volunteering for things. They want to do, they want to go up and speak to people. They want to present in front of others. They're building really strong relationships with the clients. And I have some amazing examples of that from all different backgrounds, experiences. Maybe neurodiversity plays a part there. And like, the level of relationship building that they can bring is just fantastic. So for me, like, it's always going to be a people, our business is about people. So communication is such an important part of that.
Yeah, brilliant. And Yeah, if you're ambitious, and an organization like yours that is so big, it's all about how can you stand out? How can you make yourself more visible? Um, so yeah, I think that's absolutely the key. And can you think, is there anything else that you did? So thinking about you working through the ranks, what are some of the strategies that you learned along the way to help you push up through?
Strategy is a very ambitious word. I don't know if I was that strategic about it.
That's the word we use in hindsight. You don't realise though
I
that there
know,
are
I know,
strategies.
maybe you don't. I always talk about advocacy, right, and how important that was in my career. And I was really fortunate to have many different mentors that have come in different shapes and guises throughout the sort of, the career weaving over the last 20 odd years. But I had really strong advocates. I built, very strong relationship with people that were sponsors for me. And I don't think you can underestimate that, particularly in an organization that is very large like ours. And it's something that I do speak to my teams about all the time. Two things. One, you're in charge of your own career. And two, have your advocates. You cannot underestimate the importance of somebody who will speak on your behalf in a room that you're not in. And particularly in organizations like PwC, where you are twice a year, you are reviewed on your performance. Your feedback matters. People have an opportunity to say, how did you make them feel? What impact are you having with clients? How are you leading your teams? And the cycle of feedback is quite relentless. And I mean, I did take a little bit of a break out into industry for 3 years and then came back to PwC. But that was one of the things that I did notice as a difference. That cycle of constant feedback wasn't as apparent in industry as it is in the big four. The mirror is constantly held up to yourself. And like some people might struggle with that. For me, it just means that you're always aware of your impact. And that became, it's just become a very important part of our life. So for me, it's about, managing your career, and making sure that you are actually making conscious decisions about what's going to be next, what's the next right step for you. Because if you just coast along and let somebody else dictate it, you might then end up in a place where you're a bit resentful if you haven't moved as fast as you'd wanted to. And I think I was always conscious of that, but also knowing that the right level of advocacy was important for me. Because you don't
Yeah,
do these things alone. Like nobody does it alone, you know.
absolutely not. And when you think like personal brand has become such a big term in the last few years, and what personal brand is what are people seeing about you when you're not in the room? And of course, your advocates are bigging you up and promoting you as the right person for the thing that you want to do. So, how did you make sure that you had people in the room talking about you? What were some of the things that you did?
I think the first piece for me is always having a view of who do you think are going to be the longevity people in your career, right? Particularly in larger organizations, fresh new faces come and go quite a bit. And I think I've always had a strength of being able to recognize who was there for the longer haul and who was maybe a short-term person, right? And therefore that does help you work out where should your advocacy sit. And the second piece, honestly, you can't underestimate it, really hard work. Demonstrating that actually you would take something on, but you would live to your values and you would actually do it. And that was so important. And, the first probably, I'd say 12 to 15 years of my career were all about output and all about hard work and all about demonstrating that actually I understood what client excellence was. I had a real appreciation for delivery. And another piece of advice that I was given, certainly going through the ranks, was would you pay for your output on a daily basis if you had to pay for it out of your own pocket?
Oh, that's
Mm.
good. Yeah.
And it always made you think, right, when I'm leaving the building today, did I make an impact? Did I actually deliver something? Did I have output? Now, then you get into leadership and you almost have to shift your mindset a bit because it's not just about output, but actually sort of moving through that leadership into leadership, it definitely was. And it did force you to think about, right, am I am I spending their money well today? You know?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I remember, yeah, it's the similar as thinking like if this was my own business,
Yeah.
would would it be employing me? Yeah,
Hopefully
and so
answers
now
yes.
you've shifted into that leadership level. Then what's how do you manage that? Because obviously your output is completely different. So you've been trained into this way of thinking. And was
Yeah.
that an adjustment you had to make?
Do you know, it was probably more of an adjustment than I realized it was going to be. And it sort of took me by surprise. So, and I noticed it most whenever I became a director. And I was like, I don't have anything to show at the end of today, right? And you know, you then seek counsel and you have these conversations with sort of more senior leaders in the business, and they're like, well, actually, your output was all of the conversations that you had and all of the decisions that you helped make. I was like, yeah, but there's nothing tangible in that. And that really was a bit of a shift in mindset. And it's something that I do talk to people who are now going through that process about, because you have to be prepared for it. And it definitely took me by surprise. Not as much now because I recognize that is the value that I'm placing on my output. But actually, the fact that it wasn't written down and there was, you know, it definitely lost some of its tangibility was a bit of a shock for me.
Yeah, and you're not on your own. And I remember feeling it as well. But I've certainly, a lot of the women I coach,
Yeah.
because we love getting stuff done. It's like, yeah, but I'm not actually doing anything. But you're totally underestimating the expertise that you've brought to that conversation that's just shifted it forward. Or
Yeah, and then it becomes, well, how am I placing value on my output? And my output, yes, might look slightly different, but actually it brings a significant amount of value. And that is a bit of a mindset shift, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. So, listening to your story, it could seem to an outsider like, oh, that was a charmed kind of rise through the ranks. So, you have mentioned hard work, but I'm guessing it wasn't a simple shift through that, So, what's helped you get to where you
Yeah.
are? What's it taken?
I think it's taken, like, I always think that, you know, particularly as I see people coming through as well, for me, it's that combination of confidence and resilience. And I've definitely had both of them tested many times throughout my career. And confidence, I've talked about this funny in the TED talk that you referred to. I have found confidence is something that once that dips, that's quite hard to get back from. And I've definitely been there a few times where maybe I felt like my contribution wasn't where it should be. I've maybe had feedback that wasn't what I was used to, and maybe just wasn't operating at my best. And it definitely can cycle quite quickly. And I've had a couple of examples where that's happened in the past. And, you know, having the right tool set to get back to who you are and reminding yourself of what you're good at has been the thing that saved me there. Because I think if you don't course correct or try to course correct quickly, the cycle of confidence can sort of spiral quite quickly, you know, into, you know, not an overly positive space. And I definitely see that with people. And when I see it, I think, right, how do I get you back to feeling that you're really good at this? Because that's what certainly has helped me in the past. And I think resilience, you know, there's been plenty of very, very tough days of delivery, very tough days of going through different cycles with clients, always having to be that step ahead of thinking, where are we? And, you know, it's funny, it's something I talk about with our leadership team is resilience. Are you born with it or can you make it? You know, and I think I've definitely, because I was surrounded by a lot of, you know, men at the start, right? And there's no hiding from that. I was on many occasions the only female in the room. You really had to forge your path between not trying to be like them and not trying to take on those alpha male traits, but still feeling like you could garner their respect. You could still have the strength of character that's needed, and I think that really helped me build a level of resilience. Um, and both of those, the confidence and resilience, have been really, really important pieces to draw upon whenever things have got tough, you know. And there's been some setbacks, there's been, there was a career setback, where somebody at the same level maybe got promoted and I didn't. And you think, right, okay, what did I not do that was right there? And those can be tough to get back from, and I think resilience has sort of seen me through more than anything.
And resilience, is one of those big words, a bit like confidence that we can use. And it's hard to pin down. But what do you think is at the heart of your resilience? What are the actions you take
Do you
to
know, I
bounce back?
yeah. So I am naturally calm. Like people would always say to me, like say we were doing a go live or there's a data migration, like, why are you still smiling, Corny? I'm like, I'm okay. um, I just have a natural calmness, and I think that's been important to me to retain, particularly now in that leadership position. If people see that you're, struggling or you're like losing your senses around what's going on, that's really, really not a great place to be. So I think that's probably been something that I've drawn upon quite heavily. And talking to other people, having that space for a bit of counsel as well to say, listen, this is how I'm feeling. What do you think? Or this is what I'm struggling with. Have you ever had an example of that? Um, and the third thing I would say is I learned this quite early on when I was sort of struggling with a particular output and I was sort of scurrying away trying to do it all myself and I wasn't being that successful at it. And I really learned a very valuable lesson. It's not a weakness to ask for help, right? And and sometimes when you're on the treadmill and you're trying to prove yourself all the time, you might think that actually it is a weakness to ask for help, and it's really not, And it's funny now, and if you think about the more senior end of my career, it's definitely seen as a weakness if you don't ask for help. And that's slightly different. Like it's almost inherent. You must consult. You must get other people's opinions. And I think if we can instill that earlier on, then people won't feel that that's such a strange thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've said a couple of times, that you've often been the only woman in the room. So, have you made sure you got your voice heard?
Yeah, there's a bit there about making sure you're informed, making sure you've got a point of view. There's definitely a piece around body language and tone, and then probably something that I started doing about it, a couple of years into it, whenever you realise, yeah, there's going to be me as the only female again, I stopped taking a pen to meetings because I didn't want it to be an assumption that I was the one taking the minutes. And it's just the little things like that. And sense checking, how did I come across in that meeting with trusted people? And, was my interaction at the right level at the right time? And just being open to the feedback.
Yeah,
But it takes a wee bit of bravery to say, how do you think I'm being received as well?
yeah,
I actually
and
have to listen to that.
yeah. I was going to ask you that because feedback's obviously been a big part of your career
Yeah.
and your success. And so, how do you deal with the stuff that you don't really want to hear, but you need to hear?
Do you know, I mean, probably now it's just so expected. But then everybody has a decision to make. They can either take the feedback on board or they can ignore it. Whereas now I think I see it as a real positive, and probably I've got to the point where I've had like building up over every single year an expectation that the feedback's going to come. And then what do I choose to do with it? And I've had some, I always had feedback when I was younger. You're very direct, Gráinne, you're very abrupt, right? And am I? Yes. Was that useful for me at many points and times? Yes, it was. And that's what got my voice listened to in the room, and that's what got my point of view across. But then it becomes tempering a style issue, and learning that actually that style in some situations is not what we need, and therefore knowing what it is to temper it and knowing what it is to recognize it,
Yeah,
so
I think that's a really important point, though, because you could completely pull back and then lose your strength. So when you hear a piece of feedback more than once, it can cause you to go, oh, do I need to change that? But I'm so glad to hear you didn't, because it's a piece of feedback women often get as a pointed piece of feedback. But actually, if you didn't maintain your directness and that strength of communication, you wouldn't be where you are. But you just learn to use it more strategically.
Yeah, and I think probably as you became more senior, what definitely became apparent to me more, Sinead, was how did you make people feel after the interaction, right? That definitely becomes more important. So I'm more aware of when I use it. So now I might say, guys, this is a time-bound meeting. I'm going to ask you quite direct questions, or you're going to receive really direct feedback from me, so that people are a little bit prepared for it. And now you've just got that maturity almost to know when to use it, when to temper it, when it's necessary, and when you have to bite your tongue.
Yeah, love it, love it. So you've mentioned advocacy and people along the way. What support have other people given you, and how have you actively sought that out?
Gosh, there's been so many. So lots of different ways. If you think about a career in PwC, it's very much like a ladder, right? So it is, what's the next level is, what the next rung is, and what it's going to take to get there. So for me, I've always sought out advice from people who have gone there before me, right? Who have made that transition, some successfully, some maybe taken a couple more times to do it. And really just ask them, how did they find it? How did they do it? Is there any advice for me? Because I guess people love to talk about how was their career experience and what did they learn along the way. And it's back to that, when I talked at the start about the leadership piece, where you connect the different parts of the good parts. It's the same in these types of conversations. You can't take on board every single piece of advice. You have to filter out which bits are relevant for you. But I genuinely am intrigued as to how have other people been successful? What did they learn along the way? And how do I take parts of that and make that realistic to me? Because the most important part of my leadership is authenticity, right? I have to be really, really true to me. That's so, like we would have done this work, Sinead, before around what were your values. And being authentic to who I am is so fundamental to me. And that means that I really, really steer away from the political Machiavellian game playing, because it's just the absolute opposite of who I am. So, you take on board lots of different feedback and then you work out, right, well, which bits of those will actually feel relevant and feel authentic for me.
Brilliant. Yeah. And I know it's a word that's used a lot, authenticity, like it is the bit of leadership that people talk about a lot at the moment. But you hear people talk about it and then you feel it from
Yeah,
from
what
people.
feels
And
real.
yeah, I feel it from you. There's a world of difference to what you see. Maybe some people see. So, like thinking about your career, I know it can be hard to pick out bits that mean the most to you. But what are you really proud of?
Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm very privileged to have done some very exciting engagements right throughout. I guess throughout my career, one that stands out is probably when we did the Lehman Brothers and Administration engagement. It was a real iconic one for the firm. It's all out there in the public domain. We returned such, a fantastic return back for those people who had lost their investments. And I was just really proud of how, as a firm, we came together to deliver something that was really, really important for people. And, it was iconic. You got to live through that. So for me, that was really important. And I felt such a sense of pride that we had done the right thing by our clients and by the people, which was really important. And now I'm just so proud of the business that we've built in the managed services business. We have about 700 people. We deliver, like a lot of us live locally, but deliver globally for our clients. And that's something that's been really important to me going through the firm, is having that work-life balance, particularly as I became a mummy. And, feeling that I never wanted to leave PwC's culture. I never wanted to leave it. And then it just became a little bit hard with the travel after you become a mum. So now being able to live and work in the same office, but actually deliver for global clients, that's so important for me, and making sure that we give like so many people a really fantastic career opportunity, and the business that we've built here across Belfast and Cardiff is really impactful for me, because they get to work at the heart of some of the biggest clients out there, and that's so important, and the opportunities it'll give them. So I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. And thinking about that transition, working, because I know an organisation like PwC, yeah, you've mentioned the travel, and it's very project based, and
Mhm.
when things need to be done, things need to be done. How have you managed raising a family, having children, doing those things alongside that?
Yeah, like it's just really, I have found boundaries have become more important, and I always think of my life in these sort of triangles, like relationship, money, weight, children, all that. Are they ever balanced, right? Does it actually ever feel like you're on top of things? It's funny. Yesterday evening, I was just looking at the 300 odd socks that have gathered up in one of my washing baskets, and I'm like, how is this my life?
Oh my! I know it's scary.
It really
Yeah,
is.
I
And I
hear
did,
you.
I actually intervened a while ago and said, I'm only going to buy white socks from now on, but yet the coloured socks have managed to make their way back into the box.
It's really
And
hard to get the same white socks though
yeah,
all the time as well, so they
it's
just end
unreal,
up odd.
unreal. Um, so it's about boundaries, right? And it's about being brave enough to say, listen, this is this is when I can work. This is when I need to have family time, and this is when there's flexibility. And for me, that's really important. Like I work in an organization that's based on a massive amount of trust with our teams, and that's very, very important to me, because I love to have that across my entire team. I'm saying, you don't need to tell me when you're going to do your appointment, because I know that we will balance out. If you're away for a bit of a time, then you make that up, and I don't need to know that. And I think that's really important. And I take a huge amount of comfort from the fact that we're empowered and we're entrusted to manage our day. And that allows me to have those boundaries in place, because you must have them. Otherwise, home suffers or work suffers. You cannot do both at full tilt and think that it's going to be perfect unless you outsource one completely. And that's not why I became a mum.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's choosing what's your non-negotiables, and yeah, and making sure you're there for those things. Absolutely. And so I can't believe we're nearly at the end of the time. So what if you had any last advice or success secrets or anything for people watching, what would they be?
Do you know, really back yourself, believe in yourself, put your hand up and volunteer. You've no idea the opportunities that could come your way, and stay curious about people. That's what I like. Those have sort of been some constants throughout my career, um, and they've really stood me very well. And I see the importance of them, particularly in the current environment, where there will be such more of a fight for those roles and those jobs, and having those as a backdrop, I think, is really important. And enjoy it. Like, I have had the most amazing career with so much fun, with so much memories, with so many great stories, and I feel really, really privileged to have had it. And I'm hoping there's many more years left yet.
No, I've no doubt there's
Also,
there's plenty more to come from that. So it would be lovely to do this again in a few years and see what's going on in Granny's world then. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing with us. And I've no doubt that people have taken a lot from your stories, your strategies, even if you didn't see them as strategies at the time. That's the thing, we always underestimate what we what we bring. But I can already pick out 10 golden nuggets there of things that people can take away. So thank you so much for sharing.
Brilliant, Jen. Thank you. So lovely to speak to you.